Hello, my loves, and welcome back to the Can't Stop Talking podcast. I have a really special guest today. I am so excited. I've actually been in her program and it's changed my life. So I knew I had to have her on the podcast. This is Dr. Sarah Hensley. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. As you said, my name is Dr. Sarah Hensley. I am a specialized social psychologist, and I've been studying the science of attachment and attraction inside romantic relationships for over 15 years. And I have a business where I provide coaching to clients, one-on-one coaching, couples coaching, as well as group coaching to help people achieve attachment security as well as improve their romantic relationships.
I'm literally obsessed. And you guys, I feel like a whole new woman. I found you on TikTok and I just fell in love and everything just kind of clicked for me of why I wasn't able to, attract a secure relationship in the past and now going through your program. Oh my gosh, I feel completely different. So I just can't wait to talk about that
Amazing.
today and change so many lives with this. So tell us, how did you really get here? What's your story?
Yeah, so I got married in graduate school, and I was very interested in graduate school in relational stress and how relational stress affects the body and the mind. And then, my first marriage started really going downhill. I realized that I had married somebody that had a lot of issues. I know that I had some attachment insecurities and things just got really bad. And the worse things got, the more I tried to investigate how to fix our marriage and what could be going on. And through that journey, I found a lot of information about what the problems were, but not a lot of information about how to fix the problems. That was the tricky part. And we ended up getting divorced in 2018. He unfortunately suffered with some alcohol abuse and ended up passing away from that in 2020. And through 2018 to 2020, we had a very difficult court battle, custody battle. And we have two kids together, and it really brought me to a very dark place after he died. It was also a time where within the same 5 weeks, my mom was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. I was dating a dismissive avoidant person that I had just dated after the divorce, and he kind of, I would say, abandoned me during this really dark time. I started having a lot of physical problems from the level of just all of anxiety and all of my attachments kind of being ripped away from me at one time. My ex, my mom, my current boyfriend, you know, when those attachments are removed all at one time, it can really ignite your attachment wounds. And so I just started digging in first to my faith in God because I didn't have a real relationship with God, but I came across someone who suggested that I really try to dig into that relationship. So that was my first step. And I do believe that God gave me the strength and the courage to continue the work of working on myself. And I dove into some work on attachment, really figuring out what works to actually step into attachment security. And I went through a lot of trial and error, but finally found things that did work and came out the other side. God put it on my heart to start a business to teach people what I learned and what was successful. And that has really taken off, and I've become pretty successful at that. So I feel like it was truly a calling from God and a redemption on my life, from the pain and suffering that I had to meeting the love of my life, which is my current husband, and in thriving.
Oh my God. I'm so grateful because you came into my life. So he absolutely did that work. And we just love to hear that because when I was really starting this business, it was a lot about manifesting and you don't really know the next steps till you get there. But
Yeah.
is that kind of how it happened for you? Like you didn't know that you would have this business and then one day it was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So really my goal was to just listen to God's voice and allow him to direct my steps. And I truly believe that when we tune into God and we listen to his voice and he directs the steps in our lives, he's always trying to bless us. So if we are listening to him and taking the steps he's pushing us to take, we're going to end up with the blessings.
Oh my God. I absolutely love that. And I can't agree with you more. And now your life is a testament of everything that you've been saying because you're following on TikTok, these programs, the way that you're helping people, your marriage, like it completely did a 360. And I think your story is so beautiful because it can show people that no matter where they're at, they can also get to this place. And I think something that's so exciting that I'd like to say is one of the reasons I joined your course was not only to, find a secure attach, partner, which I can't wait to in the future, but I noticed that you become a different human in
Mhm.
all aspects of life when you're
Yes,
secure with your
absolutely.
friends, work.
Yes, it just promotes overall resiliency. So you are able to become more resilient to little stressors, big stressors in the process, right? It's not just resiliency in terms of, okay, I can stay regulated in conflict with my partner, or I can be, I can withstand the discomfort of vulnerability, right? It's, hey, in my everyday life, I am just a more resilient, capable person that can handle whatever life throws at me.
Oh, I love that. Okay, amazing. And I felt that really going into your program, I had so much anxiety, and I thought that anxiety was just, it's 2024. This is what, people have anxiety. That's what it's like. And since going through your program, I have literally wiped my anxiety down to probably like 10% when I was at like 100. And so
Mhm.
it's crazy that that's all,
That's
related
amazing.
to
Absolutely.
your attachment style and your nervous system.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's our nervous systems are so activated all the time. We live in such a stressful world, a world where we're constantly trying to rush from one place to another, where we're trying to make ends meet with, prices constantly rising. We're worried about money. We're worried about time. There's so many life stressors, right? And when we build our resiliency, it does lower our anxiety because we learn to control the activity of the nervous system. The nervous system has to learn that we're not facing a life or death situation every moment or every time something is hard or difficult in our lives.
I love that. And so, for everyone listening, what are attachment styles and what happens if you heal them?
Absolutely. So, attachment theory has been around since 1958, and it's been validated in thousands of empirical studies ever since. So, we've tested these theories across different populations, across different situations and circumstances. We've looked at attachment in very young childhood, middle childhood, adulthood. We've looked at it in terms of romantic relationships, in terms of friendships, in terms of professional relationships. And so we have a ton of data on how our attachment influences the course of our lives and the relationships that we have through the course of our lives. And so attachment theory, in its essence, is this idea that our earliest experiences with our parents create messages or imprints that live in our subconscious mind. And people don't often know this, but our subconscious mind is really in the driver's seat most of the time. In terms of our romantic relationship behavior, it's in the driver's seat about 100% of the time.
Yep.
So we, depending upon how our caregivers interacted with each other and how they interacted with us directly, we may have a variety of messages that live in that subconscious. So we have people that we call anxious preoccupied folks, and they generally had caregivers that were relatively stable, that had relatively a good relationship between them, but the amount of affection, attention, and emotional attunement was inconsistent with the child. And there could be many reasons for that. Maybe there was a big family, or there was, grandma that lived with them, and, or the parents that worked all the time and they just weren't able to be around as much. So when parents were around, they did a really good job of providing that emotional attunement and affection, but there were times where parents were just absent. And so that inconsistency leads to the effects of what we call intermittent reinforcement, which creates both anxiety and addiction. So anxious, preoccupied people become very anxious in terms of their romantic relationships, and they can easily become addicted or emotionally addicted to other people. So they very much seek out relationships and they don't like to be alone.
Mm,
They can often be a little too needy, a little too clingy inside of relationships. They can often lack boundaries. So they will self abandon in order to keep the relationship because they have significant fears of abandonment and also wounds around not feeling good enough inside of relationships. So they're always working really, really hard to try to figure out, what does my partner want me to be so that I can receive that love in a consistent manner.
yep.
Sort of on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have what we call the dismissive avoidant person. Dismissive avoidance grew up with a lack of emotional attunement from caregivers. So you can kind of think about a family environment that just had the attitude of like, oh, get over it, you're fine, life's tough, you know, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you're going to be fine. and not attending to the emotional experiences of their children. They may have provided physical support or intellectual support, like problem solving with the child, but really miss the mark on attuning to the child's emotions. So a young child, when this happens, will learn that they need to suppress their emotions and
Mm.
distract their way through their emotions. They tend to also be pushed into hyper independence a little bit too soon for their development. So this really creates wounds of feeling defective, feeling sort of incapable of intimacy. And of course, this shows up in their adult relationships where sometimes at first, when there's no commitment and in the honeymoon phase, they can show up really well. But as longevity occurs inside of relationships, they tend to start to withdraw and they become increasingly uncomfortable with intimacy, with vulnerability, and then with conflict resolution because conflict in and of itself is vulnerable. So partners of dismissive avoidance often feel very neglected. They feel like their partner doesn't invest in them appropriately, that their partner can be too distant, and that their partner often withdraws, especially if there's been too much intimacy or conflict inside of the relationship. And then we have a combination attachment style called fearful avoidance. Fearful avoidance are individuals who have both an anxious side to their attachment and that dismissive avoidant side. And they can kind of ping pong back and forth between being an anxious person and being an avoidant person. It really depends on what their partner's doing and how they're behaving. They'll often act in opposition to their partner. So if their partner is avoidant, they will feel more anxious and vice versa. Fearful avoidance usually develops when there's some degree of childhood trauma where the child stopped trusting one or more of their caregivers. And so they really have a huge wound around betrayal and around not feeling worthy of love. And so they really want love, but they're very, very scared of it and scared of being betrayed at the same time. So they become people who tend to be really hypervigilant and they tend to use disorganized strategies for connection. The older term for fearful avoidance used to be disorganized attachment. So they will, sometimes be anxious and really seek connection, only to maybe interpret something as hurtful and push that person away and sort of withdraw or go into their avoidant side. They really have issues around trust, hypervigilance, and they have a huge desire to really be seen, heard, and understood. And when they don't feel that way, they have a higher likelihood of the other attachments of becoming pretty emotionally reactive during conflict in order to try to be heard, which is one of their deepest needs. And then we have secure attachment. And those folks generally were raised with parents that stayed together inside of a nuclear family, parents that demonstrated appropriate emotional attunement, boundaries, respect. They showed their children that within their own marriage, that conflict is handled openly and respectfully. So they really learned those attachment secure skills very early in life, and we call those folks born secures. The other insecure styles that I mentioned, they have to earn their security. So they have some work to do to learn those skills that secure children who grew up in more stable environments were able to learn from an early age.
I love that so much. And one of the TikToks that I actually found you on was why, if he wanted to, he would isn't correct. And I find that there's so much misleading information. I love that you're always, going on TikTok and being like, you can't listen to everyone because it's not science-based. And so why isn't that always correct that if he
Right.
wanted to, he would?
Right. So I may give that statement a little bit of validity, like early in a dating phase, right? Where you just find that you're not attracted to somebody, so you don't put in the effort. But that isn't true in long-term relationships. People don't treat you how they feel about you. People treat you to the degree that they can handle their own wounds and their own triggers on any given day, at any given moment. And so we see people who are highly avoidant, like the dismissive avoidant, who withdraw during conflict, who really deprioritize their partner, who are very self-directed people. They become, workaholics and they don't prioritize their relationships. And so it's easy as a partner of one of those people to say, oh, well, if they wanted to love me better, they would. But really what is missing from that is this idea that the dismissive avoidant has little capacity for intimacy. It's a capacity issue. It is not a want issue. So their subconscious pushing them into avoidance isn't a conscious choice for them. It's not something that they're very aware of, and it's not something that they have any clue how to fix. They go into flight responses and freeze responses as a result of too much intimacy, too much vulnerability, or conflict. And when you're in those trauma responses, those are things you can't just white knuckle your way through. You have to have tools to be able to regulate the nervous system. So if somebody's in a freeze response, and you're asking them, how do you feel about this? What do you think? And they're going, I don't know. It's because their brain is frozen. It's offline. They don't know. So they're not just saying, I don't know, because they don't care about you and they don't want to participate in working this out with you. It's because they don't have the skills and the capacity for intimacy and vulnerability when their nervous systems are that activated. So what people don't understand is most of the time inside of romantic relationships with insecurely attached individuals, they are behaving from trauma responses. They are not behaving from conscious, willful, self-directed responses, which would be want to responses, right? And capacity issues are able to responses. And so people that are highly avoidant, they don't have the capacity or the ability to
Yes.
engage
And I
in
love that because
situations.
yeah. And it's so freeing to the other person who's been saying, like putting it all on them. And it's something that I've done when they don't
Yeah,
realize that it's actually something internal of the other person.
right.
And that freed me so much. So a lot of women and men blame themselves when someone actually shows up really well in the first 4 to 6 months and then disappears. What is actually happening here?
Yes. So the first 4 to 6 months is really a honeymoon phase for example, the dismissive avoidant. And they have so many subconscious fears around commitment, around intimacy, around vulnerability. And as longevity occurs, and 4 to 6 months is a really pivotal point in relationships because it's at that point where we starting to have to make a decision of like, are we going to be exclusive? Is this going to really go somewhere? And they kind of have this subconscious internal freak out that goes, oh, wait a second. If you progress in this, you're going to lose your autonomy, you're going to lose your independence, you're going to be trapped, you're going to be stuck. You're going to have to meet their expectations. And are you really able to do that? They're going to want all of your time. They're going to want closeness, and that doesn't necessarily feel good for you. So they start the process of what we call deactivation, which is essentially just withdrawing emotionally and sometimes physically from the relationship because those wounds are coming up so strong for them. And it's the longevity of the relationship that activates those wounds. So in the honeymoon phase, the other partner is not yet attached to those fears and those wounds. And they feel capable of vulnerability. But it's when it starts to pivot into the potential to be something real and committed and long term that all of that subconscious wounding around intimacy starts popping up and causes them to back away.
Wow, I just love that because it sometimes to a lot of people it feels like, there was just this big switch up and it was something they did and it
Absolutely.
it was it wasn't that at all. It was just like you're
Absolutely.
saying. I
And it's
love that.
extremely confusing for people because the dismissive avoidant shows up really well in the beginning and you think that that's who they are. And then it truly is like this bait and switch process, but it's not conscious or intentional on their part. It is just something that is all going on subconsciously and results in their trauma responding of avoidance behavior.
That's so beautiful. And I think it's just so beautiful because it's also, it's always we put stuff on ourselves and we definitely need to heal our own things, but people's, actions aren't a result of you. It's what's going on
Right.
inside of them.
That's
I
right.
love that. What is happening if you are attracting the same person over and over again? This is really how I fell into your course because I was like, I cannot keep attracting the same person with a different
And
face.
yes, we tend to attract people that mirror the relationship that we have to ourselves. So people that are anxious, preoccupied, actually are avoidant in the relationship to self. They drop boundaries. They conform to what they think other people want them to be in order to receive love. Fearful avoidants tend to have a very chaotic and dysfunctional relationship to self. So they tend to be very harsh critics of themselves. They tend to shame themselves. They tend to just treat themselves poorly in their own inner dialogue. So then they tend to be very attracted to narcissists and severe avoidant people and people with mental health disorders and substance abuse disorders. Dismissive avoidance, they are highly anxious in their relationship to themselves and avoidant towards others. So, of course, they seek out people who have higher anxiety, higher attachment anxiety. So, In order to stop this, right, we have to first and foremost fix the relationship to self. And we have to start learning to meet our own needs, to have really good control over our thought world, to be able to self regulate appropriately in order to attract people who then match you in those skills. Because when you are an anxious person and you meet an avoidant, and that anxious person makes you try to prove that you are worthy of love, that you are good enough, and that you're not going to be abandoned, that's what love feels like to you. That's what you experienced in childhood. That's what helped develop the relationship to self. And then it's a big self fulfilling prophecy. The subconscious mind is a huge self fulfilling prophecy. And the interesting thing about the subconscious is we can't speak directly to it and make
Mm,
that much of a difference. So, in order to achieve attachment security, we have to dismantle our ability to be subject to the trigger cycle. We have to break down the trigger cycle, and we have to, work on our thought world. We have to learn emotional regulation. We have to practice secure behaviors, and then that gives the subconscious a different experience that actually imprints new messages into the subconscious. And then that changes what you're attracted to. So when you become secure, you become very attracted to secure people. If there's somebody who's, you start dating and they start pulling away, you're going to go, ugh, that doesn't feel good to me. I don't like that. I don't want to deal with that. I think I'm going to let that person go versus someone who has anxious attachment wounds that have not been healed. They are going to continue to want to chase and cling to that individual and try to prove their worth to that individual. And so achieving attachment security is not just good for your own mental health and well-being, but it is profoundly important for picking a healthy partner in the future.
yeah, and that is one of the most important things of our life. And it's so crazy going through your course. I've found as the weeks go on, like for some reason, the universe brought so many old people from my past back, and I just, would answer for a second, and then when the conversation died, I wouldn't try and re-bring it up. Like
Yeah.
I wouldn't answer their last text. Like it is really crazy how your mind starts realizing what is secure, what isn't, and how we've been, you know, exactly your subconscious has been, I wouldn't say lying, but just looking for the things that you thought that you wanted when you really thought you wanted healthy love.
Yeah, it does. The subconscious is a huge, huge self-fulfilling prophecy. And the only way to change it is to start giving it different experiences. And so we have to be able to dismantle our triggers in order to end up in that different experience, getting those different results that then rewire the subconscious to believe love is safe. People that love you are, stay, they don't withdraw. People that love you treat you kindly and respectfully. They don't, become reactive or abusive. So we have to be able to give our subconscious different experiences. And as the subconscious starts to feel those experiences, because the language of subconscious is feeling,
Mm,
subconscious mind does not have words, it does not have language.
hmm.
And so when we start to feel different, it becomes again that giant self-fulfilling prophecy in a positive direction of security where safety starts to feel good and safety is attractive, whereas inconsistency is no longer attractive or reactivity and abuse is no longer attractive.
Absolutely, and I actually had this happen in my life yesterday where I had a friend who she kept, in these circumstances would use fighting, like fight with her words.
Mhm.
And she was like, next time I'm just not going to fight. And I let her know from this course, I said, your body's in fight or flight. You don't get to decide if you get to not fight. It's exactly what you said. You need to use the tools to the next time your body's not going to spike that, feeling inside of you.
Right. We have to learn to dismantle our trauma responding. And that involves a number of tools in the thought world, tools in speaking to the nervous system, and really understanding what are the different options, right? And so, but we have to practice those tools. The actual magic of stepping into secure attachment comes from the practice. It's not something where, oh, I understand that I'm doing something wrong and I want to do something differently. Like you said, these responses are automatic trauma responses. They're happening in 0.2 seconds. And so just saying, oh, I'm not going to fight next time is really unrealistic because your brain is trained to go up into that trauma response and to execute that trauma response. So we have to rewire the brain and rewire the nervous system towards security. And that takes time and it takes practice.
Yes, but it's the most rewarding thing ever. Okay, love this. What are ways that secure people act?
Yeah, so secure people, first and foremost, they aren't attracted to red flags. So in the dating phase, when they see someone who maybe communicates inconsistently or sees somebody who gets a little too reactive over something small, those red flags are things they're going to turn away from really quickly. They're going to go, no, that doesn't feel good to me. I don't think we're compatible. And they're going to move on. And because secure individuals have a very healthy relationship to self, they don't mind being alone. They have a normal drive to seek intimacy because they're human, but they also are okay in the relationship to themselves and being alone. So if they meet someone and there's red flags, instead of being like, oh, well, being alone is horrible, like the anxious preoccupied feels, right? They are able to go, no, I'm just going to go back to this time with myself and my relationship to self because that's an okay space to be. People who are secure have good boundaries. They're able to express their needs inside of relationships very clearly and hold boundaries around those needs being met. They're able to handle conflict in a way where they stay present and they stay engaged, but they don't become overreactive or they don't shut you out and withdraw. They are able to be vulnerable appropriately. And then I think most importantly, they can process their emotions effectively.
Incredible. Like everyone needs this. How does becoming secure not only in relationships, but how does it affect all areas of your life? Because I'm just feeling like a new woman in all areas of my life. Every day I'm like, there's something new that I'm like, wow, I would have reacted to that differently, or I would have been triggered by that. And it
Right.
usually has nothing to do with even romantic relationships.
Right. Yeah. So earning your attachment security definitely influences your experience throughout other areas of your life as well. You, like I said before, you become a more resilient person. I think you become a more patient person. You become a more logical person, but you also become someone who really understands that both your emotions and your logic have to be taken into consideration when you make a decision. And so people who are highly anxious operate very heavily on emotion. People that are highly avoidant operate very heavily on logic and they're suppressing their emotion. And neither of those routes are very healthy. Emotions inform us. They do. They're signals. They're signals that something isn't right here if we're experiencing a negative emotion. But we don't want to be people who instantly react based on that negative emotion because we can't tolerate the feeling of it. Secure people really are able to sit in the difficulty and the discomfort of negative emotions, and they are able to take that energy out and move that energy out appropriately once the emotions have sort of done their job of signaling that things aren't right. Anxious people who are highly anxious, so that's the fearful avoidant or the anxious preoccupied, they kind of allow their emotions to be a tornado. It's just the emotions are there, they don't know what to do with them, they kind of drive their behavior, and the tornado just has to fizzle out, just has to wind down. So that can really leave those individuals in a lot of discomfort for a long time. The avoidant person is doing the opposite. They're suppressing their emotions. Their emotions not informing them at all, right? And they're going up into this freeze response of disassociation, which is like this, I don't even care, whatever response, which doesn't lend them to resolve conflict. It doesn't lend them to, you know, create real intimacy inside of relationships. And so our emotions have to be processed appropriately and properly. And whenever we encounter any life stressor, whether it's within our romantic relationship or it's within our job or it's within, a friendship, these skills are applicable to those situations as well, where we can process our emotions effectively, we can hold boundaries effectively, we can communicate clearly and rationally, we can stay engaged during difficult conversations. I think just overall resilience, patience, and a view of being able to be kind and respectful and honest with people and letting that be the values that really drive you forward in your life.
Oh my gosh, I love it. And things that have happened in my life that I didn't even know is I feel more present because I'm more in my body than my thoughts. I'm, eating better when I have that anxiety. It was hard to eat, sleeping better. One of the biggest things is trust my emotions. I would go to other people to know if, should I be mad at this person? Should I feel this way? Instead, I could say, no, I do feel this way or I don't feel this way. And what you said about that emotion versus logic, you can actually see it as a roadmap. And now I know how to handle conflict on my own instead of getting anyone else involved. So it's just
Right.
me between the person who it's with. And I know, like, also if someone's treating me right or treating me wrong because it's not my attachment style that's making up these betrayal wounds and all those things.
Right.
It's incredible. I'm
Right.
obsessed.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you were in the group. You made a great contribution to the group, and I really appreciate your involvement and your participation. And I really feel like more people should know just how powerful this is in creating resiliency in your own life. I think that people should understand that it can dramatically affect your parenting as well. Becoming an attachment parent was one of the best things that I ever did, because my daughters now trust me very, very deeply. They know that they can come to me and they can share their emotions, and I'm not triggered by their emotions, and I can help them process and work through their feelings appropriately. And I can teach them, what are the secure ways of responding if there's a problem with a friend, and what boundaries may we need to set in that relationship. And so my girls are absolutely thriving. And I think that even after the trauma of losing their father, being an attachment parent has led them to a significant source of safety in our home. And I mean, I have to think a lot of that with their stepdad as well, because he's very secure and he's a wonderful, loving step parent. But it's just a beautiful gift to give your children, because your children can trigger you too. Your children
Yeah.
will trigger you as much as your romantic partner will trigger you, because
Yeah.
you're being triggered. Like, there's these little versions of me, and if they do something wrong, well, then that says something about me, right? But when we
Yes.
become extremely vigilant of our thoughts, that no, sometimes children act out, and that isn't a reflection of you as the parent. That is potentially normal and developmentally appropriate. Or if my child, doesn't do something that I ask them to do, it doesn't mean they're this disrespectful being, right? It just means
Yes.
that they're a child, and maybe they need additional supports to complete that task, or an additional reminder. And so you don't only stop becoming so triggered and offended and reactive in your romantic relationships, but you become a very calm, supportive, and loving parent. My youngest child just made me a card for Mother's Day, and it was this thing they did at school, and it says, "I love my mother because," and she said, "because you are so calm and you are so helpful." And I don't think that, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I would have considered myself a super calm parent. I mean, I wasn't a raging parent. I didn't spank my children or scream at my children regularly, but I was often irritable and frustrated with my children. And now
Yeah.
I'm able to maintain a lack of irritability. I'm able to maintain this calm, kind, demeanor. And that teaches them that, hey, we can stay calm even when things are a little bit difficult. So I would tell people that it doesn't just affect romantic relationships, but your parenting, your friendships, your work environment relationships as well.
Everything. And that's going to help generational trauma because they're going to grow up to raise their kids the same way. And I think the craziest
Absolutely.
Yeah, the craziest part for me is when I started to become more calm, just like you said, it actually triggered, I think, for my subconscious that I was like, we don't feel safe here. Like we're not having high highs, low lows. And now after being in this feeling for, a couple weeks, I feel this sense of calm that I'm obsessed
Mhm.
with and that I love. And so at first it felt like, wait, this is crazy. And now it feels like exactly like you're saying, feeling calm in every situation feels present, feels just what I wish it feels like I took a Xanax every day.
Yeah. I mean, truly, we can change the baseline activity of our nervous system. There are tools, and that's what I teach in my group program, are the tools around lowering the baseline activity of your nervous system to keep it in that, what we call parasympathetic or ventral vagal state of non-reactivity. And when we're in that state, we're curious, we're calm, we're kind, we're open, we are mindful of the present moment. And when we can approach situations with curiosity, with kindness, with being calm, with being mindful and compassionate, and with empathy, we're going to be a lot more successful in those relationships.
Wow, I'm obsessed. Okay, so a lot of people, and this is something that I definitely had a belief about, they're scared to let go of a relationship that they're currently in because they don't believe they can find someone else. How can they switch their mindset and feel like there's an abundance of people out there for them? Because I feel like that's really when people feel safe to, other than these tools, to leave.
Right. And so that's usually coming from a wound of fearing abandonment, right? So it's
Mm.
really a wound that's telling a story that's not true, right? If I don't hang on to this person, what if I never find somebody else? There's 7 billion people in the world. I always say that it is the number one concern that anxious folks have in letting go of somebody, and even sometimes avoidant folks. What if I never find somebody? The chances of somebody not finding a new partner are slim to none. Okay. You're going to find someone else, but it's not just about finding somebody else. It's about finding the right someone else, because the purpose of a relationship is to be happy. And if you're in this relationship that is not making you happy, that isn't meeting your needs, or that is causing you pain, then you would be better off developing that healthy relationship to self, because you will always have yourself. And even if you're alone, if you're able to meet your own needs and you're able to feel comfortable alone and in that relationship to self, it's easy to walk away from what doesn't feel good. And so I would tell people, instead of doing everything under the sun to try to make it work, if you've, and of course it depends if you're married or you're not married. If you're married, we want to try to save marriages. We want to try to intervene as much as possible. But to those that are dating people that don't have kids with these people, you have a free and clear break that you can make. And might as well make that and pour into your own attachment security and develop that healthy relationship to self, because you will always be there for yourself.
I love that. That is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. And I just feel like after this program, I love myself so much more than I could have ever imagined. So, my last question is, how do people become secure? And I know it's through your program. So, I'd love you to also tell everyone about your incredible program, because I want everyone listening to, if they have the chance, to take it.
Yeah, so I do individual coaching. I also have a colleague that I've directly trained that does individual coaching. Individual coaching is much more, I think, focused for people who have very, very significant, specific relationship problems, like maybe their husband or wife it has narcissistic tendencies, right? And they're trying to figure out, how do I leave this relationship? That might be a good choice for individual coaching. For somebody that just says, I know I have this insecure attachment style and I want to become secure, my hybrid group program is definitely going to be the best bet for that, because you get so many resources that you get to keep for life. And it really packs in kind of 12 weeks of coaching into this 4-week experience, where they still get access to me in a small group setting. They can remain anonymous or not, in the small group, and they get to pick my brain. And then they get all of these, they get my online course, they get all of the tools, in PDF format, so they can print them out, they can keep them for life and constantly return to them to know exactly what they're supposed to be doing for long-term practice after the course is over. So definitely recommend my hybrid group program for anybody out there that says, okay, maybe I'm in a dysfunctional relationship and I need to become secure, because I need to learn how to set boundaries with my partner. I need to learn how to communicate better. I need to learn how to solve conflict in a healthy way. I would definitely recommend the group. And they can go to my website, thedatingdecoder.com, and click on book group. And they will see the days and times options that they can choose from.
I love that. And I want everyone to know I went in as a single person. I'm still single. And I did that to be able to, find the tools to find a secure relationship that I know exactly from doing this I'm going to be able to. But like I said, one of the biggest things I didn't even know would happen is my anxiety that I've suffered with for years. I can't believe it was attached to this work. And so, yeah, I highly
Yeah.
recommend people
I
doing that
mean,
program.
for sure. I mean, I had lots and lots of anxiety. I had generalized anxiety disorder, I had panic disorder, I had elements of OCD, and I don't suffer from any of those things now, because I've learned to control my thoughts, regulate my nervous system, and do all of the things that I need to do to be able to keep my nervous system from thinking that there's a threat around every corner. And so for people, and this is the same for people who struggle with depression as well, because depression is very thought based. And every thought that we have speaks to our nervous system. So we have to be able to be speaking safety into our nervous
Yeah.
system. It's really important.
Absolutely. I know I used to be that person who would like get a text and it would ruin my day, and that's just
Sure.
not me anymore. And it feels incredible. I just love you so
Thank you
much.
so
I'm so
much.
inspired by you. I'm just so happy that God brought you to do this work. Like you have no idea. Just plug where they can find you on, TikTok and Instagram and your podcast that I'm absolutely obsessed
Yes.
with. I love it. So yeah,
Thank
tell
you.
everyone where to find you.
Yes, you can follow me on Instagram at the Dating Decoder, Facebook at the Dating Decoder, YouTube at Dr. Sarah Hensley, TikTok, I'm the Dating Decoder / Dr. Sarah Hensley. You can find me under both of those names. And then yes, we did just drop a podcast. Apple, we're kind of waiting on Apple's approval, but we are all on Spotify, Amazon, and all the other platforms. And hopefully within the next week, it'll be dropping on Apple as well. And it is called the Love Doc Podcast because we are actually sort of trying to make that podcast a little more broad in terms of all things, moving away from just specifically attachment and attachment security, but moving into things related to love and even life and takes on more broader issues as well. So would love for people to check that out. That's on my YouTube channel and should be available on all platforms very soon.
Oh my gosh, I'm obsessed. And I'm going to link everything below for everyone, but please go
So
follow
much.
her. She's incredible. And thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate
And
it.
that for this opportunity. I'm so glad to have met you as well.